get your feedback.
All right. Okay, so our topic today is titled Project Scope Management. Project Scope Management. So, what we want to look at today is scoping of our project work. Okay, so what do we mean by scope? I would like you to take note of this first statement. When we use or when we mention scope, or anytime you come across the word scope, I want you to think of it as simply the work. So anytime you think about scope, as we have on the screen, project scope management. So anytime you think about scope, I would like you to think of it in this perspective by saying or knowing that scope automatically can be referred to as work to be done. So when you are reading your materials and you come across the word scope in a project, what they are simply talking about is work to be done. All right, so please, I would like you to make note of such statement. So when we talk about scope, that is the aspect of the project where we actually need to focus on the work that needs to be done. So which means after the discussion with the project sponsor, we have been able to prepare the project charter. All right, we now have the information of what needs to be done. So scope in a project simply means what needs to be done or the work to be done. Excuse me. So when we now talk about project scope management, we are not saying that this is not just what needs to be done, but when we say scope management, we are saying that it is a process of defining work or what work is required, and then making sure all of that work and only that work is done. So we can now say that scope management or project scope management is the process of defining what work is required, or better still, okay, what is the work that we need to do, and then the project manager is now making sure that all of that work that has been defined that they need to do is only what is done. That is now what project scope management. All right, so it is very, very important to make us understand that statement, that when we mention or we make use of the word scope, we are simply saying that, oh, that is work that we need to do. Every project has a work that needs to be done. If your project is a 70 years birthday barbecue project or birthday party, there are some specific work that needs to be done to achieve that result. Okay, so that is what refers to as scope. So when we now say scope management in this context, we are focusing more on making sure that all the work that we need to do for that particular project, we note and identify all that work, and now making sure that only those work that we have identified is actually what is done. That is what project scope management. So you can see, just like as we have on the screen, you see the word only is um, is highlighted with color red. All right, so you can see that according to the definition, all the work of the project, which means we are going to sit down and say, okay, let's sit down and define all the work that needs to be done. And when we are finished defining all the work, then we're going to now settle down and say, okay, the project manager will ensure that only that work is actually what needs to be done. All right. So that is what project scope management. Now, excuse me, what is the essence of defining all the work? The essence of making sure you define all those work is so that it can now help you create a boundary. What do you mean when we say a boundary? A boundary in such a way that you will now know which work is to be done and which work is not to be done. So it becomes easy to identify the works that we don't actually need to do. Why? Because you have only stated all the works that needs to be done. So if any other work is to be added that is not stated from the beginning, it can easily be spotted out that that particular work was not agreed upon to be carried out. Then that is what refers to as what? Scope management. All right. So in our discussion of scope management, we have two aspects of scope management that we need to look into. All right. We have the product scope and the project scope. So now, if we said that scope is the work that needs to be done, then let's now look at it in these two perspectives. So which means there is work that needs to be done in terms of the product which we want to achieve, and there is also what we refer to as a project scope, which is how we actually need to do that particular work. Now, so what is the difference between these two we have on the screen? You see that product scope, it's actually centered on what are the requirements or the features that is or the functions that is associated with the product. All right. Now, if we carry out this project, what is the product we want to achieve? Now, that requirement, that characteristics, that functions, that features that the end product we have becomes what? A product scope. For instance, if you want to carry out a project around house, or you are building three-bedroom flat, for example. So three-bedroom flat is the project you are working on. Now the product scope is now the physical house. And now when we now say product scope, we are now saying that, okay, what are the physical requirements or the features that you want in that house or that three-bedroom flat? So that at the time the project finish, those features will be what you will see in that house. That is the meaning of what? Product scope. So product scope is those physical or tangible or intangible features, characteristics, requirements, functions that the end product will have after it has been created. That becomes what? Product scope. Then project scope in this context is far different from product scope. Why? Because project scope is not the work that will produce the product scope. So project scope is now actually the work the project will do to produce the product of that project. So you can see that the project scope encompasses the product scope. Excuse me. So which technically mean that the project scope is those physical work and only that work that needs to be done to create the product scope. So the product scope automatically becomes the physical requirement in terms of a product that you need in that end product. Or in terms of a service, it may now be intangible, which are the features, the functions, or the functionality, the characteristics of that particular end product. All right. So please take note of those differences. The project scope is the work that creates the product scope. All right. All right. I hope that is clear. BC, is that clear? Hello, is that clear, BC? All right. Joseph, what about you? Is that clear? Hello, Joseph, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's move on. All right. Now, in line with that statement we just made, what can make the project scope become unrealistic? What can make that work that has been defined to be carried out to produce the product scope unrealistic? There are some simple problems that can occur that can make it unrealistic. Example of such problem, as you can see on the screen: number one, ambiguity. All right. So what do we mean by ambiguity? Ambiguity in such a case is in a simple term is when what you say we should do, it is not clearly stated. It is confusing. And if what you are stating that a team member should do is not clearly stated, it can mislead the person that is going to carry out the task. So to avoid that confusion, your scope statement of work, or your scope, needs to be clearly stated and to the point. All right. So ambiguity has been a problem. You see that you have several meetings, you explain, the person is using too much grammar, and that grammar is causing confusion, and you don't want to act as if you are a novice. You want to act like a professional, and you refuse to ask the question, excuse me sir, can you define that term so that we understand what it means? You now assume you know. All right. And because you assume you know, you don't want to fall your hand by going to ask the person that is talking, say, excuse me, can you explain what you mean? Can you, in what context? You don't say, no, if I say that now, they will look as if I'm not up to date, or I'm not this. Then, because you don't want that to happen, you assume what they are saying, that you understand, whereas it is not clear. So that is what ambiguity, too much grammar. All right. Ambiguity can lead to confusion and unnecessary work. We have seen that happen. What you think you explain properly, the person didn't understand because you use plenty big grammar, and the person cannot break those grammar down to fit the context in which you mean it. Okay, that is what ambiguity. Then another problem that has occurred while some scoping is not often achieved is what incomplete scope or incomplete work to be done. All right. So incomplete scope can lead to schedule slip. All right. So to avoid that, scope needs to be complete and accurate. So which means what you are saying that your team should do should be clearly stated. It should be accurate. All right. You shouldn't have a statement that is not driving the point. It should be very complete and what, accurate. So it should be very complete and what, accurate. Then another thing again that you should take note is that another problem that also occur when we look at scoping is this issue of um, having a continuous work being done on the project. We call it transient. Okay, having a continuous work being done on a project. Okay, having what, a continuous work being done on the project. Okay, we have seen instances in a project where that uh, the particular task that needs to be done, you just suddenly discover that unusual tasks keep coming to be added without you knowing, and that can make the project work not to come to a proper closing. You're just wondering that all this work we have been doing, why is it that before we finish any work, more work keep coming? All right, it's because of that. It happens most times in project, inability to complete a project. Okay, to avoid this, scope document needs to be finalized and remain unaltered for the duration of the project. So all these changes being made anyhow in the project because of what to be done can delay the delivery date of the project. So it will now look as if people don't know what you are doing. Why? Because somebody will just come and make change. Somebody will just come and say this is not okay. Somebody will just come and keep adjusting. All right, so you must take note of all that. Then also another problem with scoping is non-collaboration. All right, we have seen scope that is not collaborative in terms of misinterpretation of requirement and design. Okay, now all stakeholders are supposed to collaborate, and because of that collaboration, they are not part of that beginning stage of your requirement. You are not getting the cooperation you need to get from all those stakeholders at the beginning. So when you're not getting those cooperation at the beginning, it can affect scope of work. So all these four that we have mentioned are the major problem with scoping of our project. So what is scope again? As I said earlier, scope simply means work to be done. Then what is scope? Project scope management. Project scope management is now defining or identifying all those work that needs to be done and making sure that only those work are actually done. All right, that becomes what? Project scope management. Excuse me, sir. Who has the responsibility to ensure that only that work is actually done? It is the responsibility of the project manager to ensure that, okay, the work that we have agreed to do, I'm going to make sure that it is only that work so that nobody will delay the time we are supposed to deliver the project. I'm going to make sure that it is only that work that needs to be done. So that becomes what we refer to as what? Project scope management. So in addition to project scope management, so you can see a breakdown of all the things we have said. Constantly checking to ensure that you are completing all the work. Who is doing that? The project manager. Not letting people randomly add to the scope of the project without structure change process. Remember we spoke this thing in the last class. We said that changes can be made to every other aspect of the project, but the only aspect that change cannot be made is the project charter. So every other document or every other aspect of the project can be changed, but you must follow through a definite change process. Okay, so that is that. So now you are not supposed to, after we have said that we have agreed that we are going to do 5 tasks, you have already defined the works that needs to be done. Then somebody just came from nowhere and started adding more tasks to it without following due process. Do you understand that now? So what then is scope management? It is now the project managers to ensure that nobody can just add work to the originally identified task without following through due process. And that due process is the change control process. So what is now also the responsibility? The project manager must make sure that all changes will fit what? The project charter. What do we mean by saying that the project manager should ensure that all the changes should fit what is in the project charter? Because in the project charter, that is where you have the business case, the original reason why the company is embarking on that project. So if anybody is bringing any change or requirement that should be added to the project or to the scope of work that needs to be done, and it does not fit the original purpose of that project, you cannot honor it. So who is going to make sure? The project manager is going to make sure that all changes fit within the project charter. Okay. Also defining and controlling what is and what is not included in the project. So scoping, preventing extra work. So all these things measured are all what you do when we say proper project scope management. Who ensure all these things? The project manager. Okay. Now, what are the project management processes? What are the things we actually need to do from the project management perspective in order to be able to carry out proper project scope management in a project? There are 6 project management processes that we need to follow. Number 1, we need to plan scope management. So, which means you are going to plan how you are going to manage the scope for the project. You are going to also collect requirements. You are going to define scope. you're going to create WBS, you're going to validate scope, and you're going to control scope. So all these process, we will explain them one after the other. Any question? Any question, please? Okay. All right. All right. So let's look at them one after the other. Now, the first point is to plan. When we say plan scope management, don't mind all this big grammar they are saying. Oh, just follow me. When they say plan scope management, what they are trying to say is that now let us take out time to look out for what we need to do and now create a plan on how we need to do it. So this process of plan scope management, we are saying that it is like having a meeting where everybody that will participate in the project comes and sit down and they begin to look at, okay, what do we actually need to do in order to take care of this scope? And we don't want a situation that when we start the project, anybody can just come from anywhere and add additional work for our project. So we don't want that. So because we don't want that, how do we make sure we plan for the scope? Now, that one is plenty grammar. I want to show you something. In real life project, you see this first one. Please look at the screen. In real life project, you see this first one where they said plan scope management. All right. Now, if tomorrow you walk into the office as a certified project manager and you are called upon, say, okay, BC, I want you to come up with a plan for this scope, for this project. The question now is, okay, how do I go about it? Just listen carefully. Everything you need to do about plan scope management are all these other things you have under this place. So which means all that I need to put in place to have my plan scope management are, I will have to first collect requirement. Number two, I will have to define scope. Number three, I will have to create WBS. Number four, I will have to validate scope. The last one, I have to control scope. So all these items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are practical things that you will do when you are planning for project scope management. Do you get that secret? So in real life project, I say, oh, maybe you are discussing with your sponsor or the owner of the organization who is giving you the project. That's okay, sir. What's the scope of work? He now tell you the scope of work. You don't need to now start cracking your head on what should I do. Oh, what should I do now? How should I go about this scope for the project? No, don't need that. That's, you're just stressing yourself. Okay, so what do you need to do is collect requirements, define what you need to do, create a structure for it, and you create a process to validate it. So we're going to look at that one after the other. So plan scope management, I've told you, is that process where we are saying that, okay, let's now create that plan that we're going to use to manage scope for the project. And let's document everything we are going to say. So everything that will be said will be documented on how the project scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. So automatically, this document that we are going to create as a result of this planning session is going to provide guidance and direction on how scope will be managed throughout the project. So you see that automatically it provides what? Guidance and direction, okay, on how scope will be managed throughout the project. So this automatically becomes an official document that will be used in taking care and managing your scope. Now, when we are planning for scope, excuse me, sir, what do we want to achieve? Is to automatically create two things. And what are those two things? Remember, I explained input, tools and techniques, and output. All right, when we're starting the discussion, I said input are the things you need. You can see that project charter is needed, project management plan is needed, EEF and OP is needed, You can see expert judgment. We know what expert judgment is. We know meeting. You see that all these things are constant. Now, what do we want to achieve? What we want to achieve is now what? The scope management plan, which become the official document. But apart from the scope management plan, there's also what we refer to as the requirement management plan. How do we go about the requirement? All right. So now let's now discuss the requirement. What then is collect requirement? Collect requirement as it sounds is to collect your requirement, or in a more easy and fancy way is to actually gather the requirement. Now the question now is, what is a requirement? Yes, BC, let me ask you, in a project, what do we refer to as a requirement? Yes, I can hear you, BC. What do you say requirement is? What can you say requirement is? Okay. Yes, I can hear you. So who provide? Okay. Okay. So who do you think provides that requirement? Yes, who do you think provides that requirement? Okay. All right. Thank you. That is very correct. All right. So if we are to put that in a statement or something easy to easily remember, all right, we cannot say that requirements are what stakeholders need from a project or product. So what they need, that okay, oh, this project you want to embark on, oh, this is what we need from it. Oh, we need an app that can do this, do that, do that. All those do statement that they are mentioning is what we refer to as what requirement. So if for instance is like Joseph that is into construction, a requirement in a building project, for example, can be what the things they want in the house or in that three-bedroom apartment. Oh, we want it like this, we want this to be here, we want this kitchen, we want that toilet to be like this, we want this to be like this, we want all those wants that the stakeholders n- need is what we refer to as what a requirement. Now, like I asked BC, I said, who do we collect requirement from? Take note. Requirements are collected from who? From the stakeholders. All right. So requirements are collected from who? The stakeholders. Those that are involved in the project. Those that owns the project. All right. So just like as BC was explaining, the tech guys, okay, all those set of people, they are the set of people we collect requirement from. All right. So that becomes very, very important. Okay. So, and also take note, requirements in every project should be able to solve the problem associated with the project. All right. So that is that. So requirements should relate to solving problem or achieving the objectives aligned in the project charter. So take note. Those requirements are very key when it comes to this process. Now, if you look at what I am trying to say here, this becomes the most tedious aspect of the project. Excuse me, sir, what do you mean when you say most tedious? Collect requirement process is that process where the project manager begins to meet each of every one person involved in the project to hear from them what they actually expect or need from that project. That is the process of collect requirement. So you can see that it becomes somehow or very important for the project. So collect requirement process involve gathering more details. It is the process that involves gathering more details, input on what is required on the project, on what is required on the project. So take note, that becomes what? Collect requirement. Gathering details of what is required. Okay, what exactly are the things you want me to do? So that breakdown, that explanation, all those items pointed out, stated out as regarding what you should do is what we refer to as what? Collect requirement. Okay, so is it possible to collect requirement without a stakeholder? No. So it is not possible to collect requirement without a stakeholder. It is not possible. So that is why we said that who do we collect requirement from? We collect requirement from the stakeholder. Now, what can we use? We'll look at the different requirement collection techniques later. Okay, so when we are collecting requirement, it is actually from what? Those stakeholders. And it is also possible that you collect requirement from the organization previous project. All right, it's possible that there have been previous project done by the organization. You can also collect requirement. All right, going to the previous project. Okay, this is what they did. Okay, let me get those information and use it in my current project. So that is also very, very important. Okay, so that is what we mean by collect requirement. Now, it is that requirement you have collected from the stakeholders, from everybody. Just imagine in a project where you have 20 stakeholders. So which means you are going to meet these different stakeholders to actually ask them what are their expectations or what are their needs regarding the project. It is from the discussion they will have with you that you can now begin to use to plan for your project. Okay, so what are we trying to achieve when we are collecting requirement? What we want to achieve is a requirement documentation. So a requirement documentation automatically becomes a document that contains all the needs or expected needs from every stakeholders that you have had meeting with, every stakeholders you have discussed with regarding their expectation for that project. Just imagine a big project like hospital. All right, maybe a big project like hospital. You see that there will be different aspects of that project. So everybody that will be interested or concerned in that project, all the different stakeholders, you are going to meet them one by one to actually understand and collect their requirement. So now, just imagine you meet stakeholder A, you collect requirement from stakeholder A, you are going to write it down. And in what format are you writing it down? Please, this is the format. The name of the stakeholder, the department. Okay. The name of the stakeholder, the department, the knowledge level, expectations, influence, phone number, email. All right. So you collect all those information. So just imagine in an information in a document you have information of all such of 20 different stakeholders who have interest in the project. So that document where you have all their needs or requirement or features that they want to see in that project, that is where it is documented, it becomes what we refer to as requirement documentation. Okay, that is required. Then now you can also see on this case, there's what we refer to as what requirement traceability matrix. What is requirement traceability matrix? Requirement traceability matrix become very necessary and very important when you look at the nature of project you are working on, because we have come to realize that it is possible that when you collect requirement from stakeholders, and at the end you are now asking the stakeholders to come and check what you have done, and the stakeholders start denying. What is requirement traceability matrix? Requirement traceability matrix, as it sounds, is being able to trace a requirement given to you to a project objectives stated in the project charter. So if, for instance, stakeholder A gave you a requirement, you are going to trace that requirement to see if it is in alignment with the project charter. So which means, if we rephrase all we have said, is it all requirements that should be worked on in the project? No. Do we have to collect all the requirements? Yes. But the only occasion we cannot work on any requirement is when the requirement is not in alignment with what you have in the project charter, which means the business objective or the business case, the reason why the project was actually chosen to be worked on. That is the only occasion where you can't work on such requirement. But for others requirement that are qualified, you must be able to link it. So requirement traceability matrix is the linking of a requirement to a stakeholder in line with the project objectives. Why do you have to do this linking? So that at the later end in the project, that stakeholder will not come and tell you that, no, this is not what I asked you to do. No, I'm not the one that asked you. I didn't mention this. This is not what I intend. So requirement traceability matrix is what actually helps link the requirements to the objectives of the project, okay, and ensure to be able to achieve the strategic goal of that organization. So hence the need for what? Requirement traceability matrix. Just like as you can see on the screen, there are different techniques that can be used to collect requirement. So you can see that you can use expert judgment. What is expert judgment again? Expert judgment is simply, as we have defined, meeting somebody who is more detailed in that profession, or who has experience in what you have done, in what you are doing, and you ask the person's opinion, professional advice, and the person gives you that professional advice. That becomes an expert judgment. Brainstorming, you see, brainstorming is also a project, is a collection technique. All right, is a data gathering technique. All right, now when we say data gathering technique, all the techniques that can be used to gather data. All right, so brainstorming is when you have different professionals. Okay, now I use the word different professionals, so which means you are having a session with different professionals in order to create ideas. You are trying to create ideas, develop ideas, but these ideas that you are trying to develop, you are having different professionals. You are having somebody in IT department in the meeting, somebody in engineering, somebody in marketing, somebody in sales, somebody in HR. All different professionals combined together. What you are doing, you are having a brainstorming session. Interview one-on-one. We know what interview is. One-on-one is a collection method. You can interview the person, ask the question, the person answer you, you note it down. Then focus group. Focus group in this context simply refers to, now why I'm trying to explain this to, because brainstorming and focus group almost look the same. But what focus group actually simply stand for is when you have not just, now remember I said brainstorming is group of experts, different experts. So focus group is when you have a set of experts. Oh, let's say the problem that you need to solve is is an IT problem. Instead of you to gather people who are not in different departments to come and sit down in the meeting to discuss, focus group is saying that you pick only the people in the IT department to sit down and begin to discuss and find out reasons, solutions, and generate ideas. That becomes what? The meaning of what? Focus group. So all these are different data collection technique. You can see questionnaire, you can use survey, you can use benchmark. All these are different data collection technique. Yes. Tunde, any question? Joseph, any question for me? Okay. All right. Okay, and don't worry, I will share the slide later. You still have access to the slide. Okay. Egosa, any question for me? Okay, for now. All right. So let's look at what we have on the screen. Okay. You can see this collection. Just 1 minute, please. Let me try and zoom it out. Okay. So I just hope you can see this clearly. So now you see this collection process. All right. You can see that this is just to give us an idea of what happens in that process we just talked about. You see the collect requirement process. The project manager have a discussion with who? The stakeholders. And we said that requirements are what? The needs of those stakeholders. So the project manager gets the needs of those stakeholders. What did he do? Is he immediately the stakeholder give them those needs, he will throw them away? No. When the stakeholder provide those needs, what did he do? He will assess those needs. He will check it. Then after he has assessed it, what will he do? He document the needs. So you now see that after he has assessed the needs becomes documented. All right. Then after it has been documented, he then now begin to work on those needs, which is the management of the needs, so that he can be able to achieve the project objectives. Okay. So that is the collection process. All right. Now take notes. This collect requirement process is very important to the extent that it depends on the success of the project as a whole. So which means if you collect the wrong requirement, or you assume, or you did favoritism and collect the wrong requirement from a team, from any stakeholder from this beginning, it will affect the entire process in the project. That is how important this process is, because this aspect actually focus on the work you need to do. So regarding the work you need to do, you actually need to focus on what are the requirements for those work that we need to do. So that is why this process is very, very important. If you collect the wrong requirements, it will affect the entire project. Okay, so the effort the project managers put in this process is very, very high. Remember, at this process, the project may know you are not started doing any physical work, but you are still gathering information. You are gathering information, you are documenting, putting things in place. That is what happened in this process. Okay, so now let's assume now our requirement has been collected. We have successfully collected requirement. We have gathered the requirement that we need. The next thing that you have to do is what? Define scope. All right. The next thing that you have to do is what? Define scope. What is defined scope? What is defined scope? Now, scope definition is the process. Okay, let me first and foremost say it this way. All right. I don't know if you have had a situation whereby you want to embark on a project, okay, and the owner of the project extensively is taking out time to explain to you what he actually wants in the project. That becomes what? Define scope. So the define scope process is that process in a project where we begin to look at the things that we actually want. Right? The things that we actually want. So now, based on that requirement, so define scope is now that detailed description of what the project and product entails. So what I was trying to say earlier, I don't know if you find yourself in a situation where you are discussing with a client and the client is taking his time to explain to you what he needs you to do. That explanation, all right, he did not just state it one by one. Yeah, do this, do that, do that, do that. No, he did not do that. But what he now decided to do is to now take out time to give you what? A detailed descriptions. That detailed description now is what we refer to as what? Define scope. All right. So whenever you are discussing with somebody regarding a project, and that person is taking that time to explain the nitty-gritty of that project, the in and out of that project, what are you people having? That person is defining the scope of work. Now, excuse me, sir, why is that person taking time to define? So that you will actually know what should be done. And when you know what should be done, what should not be done automatically cannot creep in. So that is the need of what? Defined scope. We have actually seen in organizations where this process of defining scope, they keep going back and forth, having series of meeting just to explain, just to buttress the point of what actually needs to be done. So defining scope is now from when you have gathered those requirements from different stakeholders and you are now sitting down to calculate, okay, they want, okay, let's say for instance in a building project, all right, let's use a building project. Let's say for instance in a building project, and I said, okay, they want 3-bedroom flats, all right, they want the kitchen to be right, and they want the sitting room to be in the middle, and they want the toilet to be, they need to have like 4 toilets and all that. Now all those things they want is the requirement. Define scope is now that process where you now say, okay, to have the sitting room in the middle of this house, what are the work we need to do? You are defining the scope of work. Okay, to have this, okay, to have this bedroom here and that 3-bedroom, what are the work we need to do? So that work you need to do that you are explaining is what we refer to as what? Define scope. Do you understand now? So defining scope is actually bettered from the requirement you have gotten from the customer. So that what you actually need to do is what we refer to as what? Define scope. So that description, that explanations of what you need to do is what we refer to as what? Define scope. And when that explanation comes, it becomes easy to actually focus on what needs to be done. So anything that don't needs to be done, if it show face or any team member is trying to do it, you can easily fix it out and reject it. That is what? Define scope. Okay. Then what do we want to achieve? Project scope statement. The project scope statement becomes a document that have the specifications of all the scope. All right, let's quickly look at that. You see now the project scope statement, it becomes a document that has a detailed specification of all the scope. So the project scope statement tells us what work you are to do and what work you are not going to do in the project. So you can see now it is defined scope is not in the work. I have collected requirement. Okay. Now, if for instance a customer tell you that I want you to paint the building white, all right, which is a requirement. Oh, this 3 bedroom flat, paint it all white. The question now, define scope will now be in that kind of requirement, for that particular requirement, for example, define scope will now be, okay, what are the work we need to do to actually paint this building right and white? Oh, we need to buy the paint. I need to get the team members or the people who are going to do it. Oh, we need to get this and that. We need all the things that needs to be done to achieve that painting the full building white. That breakdown, that definition, that explanation is what refers to as what? Defined scope. So every scope you have defined automatically forms what refers to as the project scope statement. Okay, so the project scope statement becomes that document that tells everybody in the project what work they are to do and what work they are to what? Avoid. That is what project scope statement. Okay, now in the defined scope process, there are some two major tools that becomes very easy to explain defined scope. For example, you can actually use what refers to as product analysis. When we say a product analysis, it is that technique where the project manager look at the physical product itself and begin to analyze all the components of that particular product. What exactly do we want this product to have? Just like as I was trying to say now, product analysis can be like, oh, we want this building to be painted white. You now sit down and say, okay, what are the work we need to do to have a white building? You have to now begin to state them out. That becomes what? You are analyzing the product itself, the end result, the unique outcome, that deliverable. That becomes what? Product analysis. Then there are other things like, as you can see on the screen, alternative identification. Alternative identification in this case is not saying that, well, since I want to do, let's say for instance now, alternative identification, you are trying to produce a Nokia phone, then you now go and pick Samsung phone. All right, the project now is to produce a new Nokia phone that will compete with iPhone 14. All right, which means they want a Nokia phone that will compete with iPhone 14. Now, you want to analyze that product. Alternative identification is not saying that maybe you now go and pick iPhone 14 and now begin to look at every features, everything that iPhone 14 has. What are you doing? You are using alternative identification. So all those features all those things that iPhone 14 has, you are looking at it, you are documenting it down step by step. Why are you doing that? Why? Because you are using alternative identification. So all those information now, you are now going to use it on your own to build your own Nokia phone to compete with iPhone S. That is what refers to as what? Alternative identification. It becomes very necessary. Sometimes the scope of work you are asked to do, you may not have all the information, but you can easily pick from the existing product that is already in the market and use it to scope your own product that you are working on. That is what refers to as what? Alternative identification. So, any question regarding scoping, defining scope, is it clear? Joseph, is it clear? Egosa, is it clear? Okay. Joseph, can you explain that? Let me see if you actually get what I was trying to say. Alternative identification. Okay, all right. Okay, so let me just throw light on that two question again. Now, when we say using product analysis as a technique, all right. Now, the essence of a product analysis is that we want to analyze the objective and description of the product stated by the customer. Okay, so or maybe the sponsor, and turn them into tangible deliverable. So product analysis is that tool that allow the project manager to make sure the product and project scope are understood and accurate. So product analysis is picking a product and begin to analyze all the features. Okay, now you want me to actually provide you a white, or maybe one aspect of the requirement is to have a painted white building. All right. Product analysis will now be that you are analyzing, okay, what do we actually need, or what work do we actually need to do to have a white building? You are analyzing it. Okay, we need to buy so kind of product, so kind of white, maybe emotion or contest or whatever kind of uh, white paint. Okay, we need to have this set of painters who knows how to paint very well. We need to, okay, we need to now schedule uh, the number of days, or the quantity, the number of hours, or the number of materials we need. So what are you doing? You are analyzing the product. All right, so which means in a big project like building, now product analysis is picking the building you want to work on and begin to break down, analyze each part of the building. Okay, the entrance will be here, that will be there, that will be here, oh, the kitchen will be in this location. You are trying to analyze. Now, excuse me, sir, when you are doing the work, is it everything you do together at once? You see that as the work progresses, you focus on each part as the work progresses. That becomes product analysis. Then when we say alternative identification, is also a strategy used to define your scope of work. And now, what do we mean? I use a simple example. All right, I use a simple example. My project is to create a Nokia phone with the same functionality as iPhone 14. Now, my organization have not created iPhone 14 before. So which means we are going to sit down and be using our brain to think of the functions we have in iPhone 14. All right. So therefore, a alternative analysis, that's okay. Let's go and look for somebody that has iPhone 14 and begin to look at each of the features you have in iPhone 14 and document it down so that we can use it to create our own Nokia phone. Do you get that now? That becomes what alternative what identification. So you can see that we want to create a Nokia phone that will have the same features with iPhone 14. We now look for alternative. That becomes what? Alternative identification. Yes, please. Is that clear? Okay. All right. So let's move on. Okay. Now you have successfully carried out a break. You have successfully defined all the work that needs to be done. Why? Because probably you use product analysis, you pick each component of the product or the end result, like the building, you now take your time to define all the work that needs to be done. Now, create WBS. What is the meaning of WBS? Note it down. WBS simply means work breakdown structure. Please listen, sir. Earlier in our discussion, when we started these project classes, I told you one secret. I said that as a project manager, I told you the first secret. And I said that for every project, whether big or small, complex, that one of the first secrets you must know is being able to carry out a project life cycle. And I told you that a project life cycle are those series of phases that you will design by yourself that you want this project to pass through. And I told you that it is a project manager that actually does that design, that development of those series of phases. Now, this is another secret. When you successfully create a project life cycle, the other secret is your WBS. A proper creation of your work breakdown structure. It saves you 60 more than 60% of all the stress in your project. What is a work breakdown structure? You can see as defined. All the work that needs to be done, break it down. That is what it simply means. Divide divide those work into small manageable components that becomes easy. So all those work that you have defined, now sit down and actually break those ones that look complex. Let's say for instance in a building project now you are defining, okay, we are going to lay foundation. After found, let's say for instance now maybe you bought the land in somewhere like Lekki where there is water, or VI where there is water log somewhere. The first thing you should do is not to lay foundation now. Would that be the first thing you should do, Joseph? Hello, Joe. Would that be the first thing you should do? No. The first thing you should do is not to go and quickly lay foundation. But because that place is waterlogged. So, sure you can see now. You've not started the house, so you can see that that one is even work alone. And in that one you just said now that look as if it's simple. Do you know how much will be spent on just that, getting to know the level of water so that you can fill it first before you lay foundation? So that is you have defined, okay, we are going to do that. Okay, let's even imagine, let's say for instance now, example, you bought, you want to build an hotel, and in that place where you want to build an hotel you bought the property there that is not an hotel, maybe it's all those old house that is there. The first thing to do, or the definition of scope definition, is it that the first thing you should do, you are going to start building him? You can't start building, you can't build on that existing foundation, right? The first thing should be done is to demolish. So you can see that demolishing becomes what? Defined work, as in what should be done. So you can see that defining scope now, that's okay. To build it we have to demolish first. It becomes what? You are defining scope. We demolish first, then after demolishing we lay foundation. After laying foundation we do block work. After doing block work, several other things begin to follow based on the nature of work that needs to be done. So what is now WBS? WBS now becomes when you now pick that demolishing and now begin to ask yourself, what are the series of work that needs to be done as it relates to demolishing? Do you get it now? That becomes what we are referring to as WBS. So that breakdown, when you look at, oh, we need to demolish. What do we need to do to demolish? You break it down. We need to lay foundation. What are the things we need to do to lay foundation? You begin to break out all the work that needs to be done. What you are doing is what? A work breakdown structure. Do you get that? So work breakdown structure is that process of subdividing your project deliverables those project work, that project work that needs to be done, that you have defined during defined scope, that you have taken your time to break out. Now, at this point, you are now dividing them to actually break out the level of work that needs to be done on each of those aspects. That becomes what? Create WBS. Excuse me, sir. Oh, quick things. Defining scope. Who does define scope? It is not just the project manager that does defining of scope alone. So it is not just the project manager that defines scope. I forgot to mention that. All right. It is the team. It is the team. Hello, take note. Why is it the team? It is simply because the team members actually know the level of work that needs to be done. Remember, the project manager may not be all knowledge about that particular project that he needs to be, that is a project manager on. So that is why they need the team. So also in this discussion of WBS, it is not the project manager that creates the WBS alone, because he may not know. Just for instance, now I will now be sitting down to create the works that needs to be done when we need to start a project in waterlogged area. So you need somebody who has experience in that aspect, a team member that will not tell you that, sir, this waterlogged area, for we to even start foundation first, these are this and this and this we need to do. That is the essence of having your team. So take note, it is not the project manager that creates WBS. He doesn't do it alone. But the WBS is created by the project team, which means the project manager and everybody that is going to work on the project. So it becomes easy to divide. And when the division is taking place, everybody knows the part that concerns them. So what is WBS? Work breakdown structure. You can see the definition of work breakdown structure. WBS is the deliverable oriented hierarchical decomposition of the work to be executed by the project team to accomplish the project objectives. So all these are the plenty big grammar. But what the point is that WBS is to break down the work that you have defined to do. And now, why are we creating WBS? Because you see this definition, they say it's hierarchical. You know you have already defined the work, but you are now creating WBS to create like a hierarchical structure, a diagram showing all the different aspects of the work that needs to be done. That becomes what? A WBS. All right. So I will show you an example of a WBS. Now, what do we want to achieve when we create WBS? We want to achieve scope baseline, which become the official scope document for the project. So scope baseline becomes the official scope document for the project. So everybody that will work on the project automatically agrees and work with the scope baseline. All right. Now, what is the technique for creating WBS? You can see the technique. Decomposition. Decomposition simply means to break down. Please take note. Decomposition simply means to do what? To break down. All right. Now, let's now look at, okay, so this is the meaning of decomposition, to break down. Now, when a WBS is created, okay, the first level of the WBS, let me show you something so that I will not, let me show you something so that it won't just be like abstract. For example, this is a WBS for a barbecue party. All right. This first level is the work that needs to be done that has been defined. Oh, during the defined scope, we define that we are going to have entertainment for a barbecue party. We're going to have refreshments. We're going to have cooked food. We're going to have marquee, like canopy where people will stay. Or we can say hall. Then we're going to have guest lists. These are the things we need to have or need to do to have the barbecue party. Now, WBS is now saying that all these things we have defined, let's now break it down to actually find out the work that is there. Entertainment. What are the work we need to do to entertain? You see, we need a DJ. You see, all these things are what we need to. Oh, we'll have a DJ, then we'll have auction script, we have price. All these things are what we will do to entertain the guests that will come. Then you can see under refreshment group, they break it down. What kind of refreshment are we looking at? And I say, okay, we're going to have drink and food. You can see that they also look at, okay, now, when you say drink, what kind of drink? You can see the breakdown. Now say, oh, home brewed drink, prepared fruits, lemonized feeds, fresh coffee. So you can see that they keep doing those breakdown until they get to the final level. Under food, you can see the food line took down like this and say, oh, we have going to have prepared corn, and marinated steak, homemade burger, prepared kebab, sliced potato. You can see under pre-cooked food, you can see the kind of pre-cooked food they mention. All right, roasted chicken, chilled chili and rice. So you can see all these different breakdown. Now, this aspect that can no longer be broken down, which is the lowest level of your WBS. Please take note of this statement. The lowest level of your WBS is what refers to as work package. Work package. Work package. So the when you now if you any breakdown you do and you get to the point you can no longer do a breakdown, that point where you can no longer do a breakdown, it becomes what refers to as a work package. What is a work package? A work package becomes the smallest unit of work that can be assigned to anybody to be performed. Or we can say it is the lowest level in our WBS structure. So if I want to identify a work package here, all these aspects that becomes easy to assign tasks to somebody, it becomes a work package. So which means under entertainment, the work package we have, DJ, it becomes easy. I can ask myself, who will I get for a DJ? Who can I assign this DJ job to? You can see. Okay, look at price. What kind of price do I get? So it becomes easy to do the task. So WBS is what the actual breakdown of that work you need to do to that level where it becomes very easy to manage and assign to team members. That is what refers to as what WBS. And I was trying to say earlier that the lowest level of a WBS is what refers to as work package. All right, you can see it, work package. So that is the work package becomes that aspect that becomes easy to assign to somebody to complete. Oh, you can now say, Kunle, I want you to focus on DJ. Don't do any other thing. Just focus on DJ. Oh, okay. And Kunle, I want you to focus on digging the foundation. Oh, Wale, I want you to focus on blending the concrete that have been placed on the foundation. So you understand now? So you can see that by the time you do all those breakdown of work, it become easy for you to be able to assign to every team members in your project. This is another example. You can see a bicycle project, for example. You can see that all these different components, by the time they dismantle it, you can see the WBS. This is, sorry, I know that it looks small. Okay, okay, just sorry. So you can see that, for instance, this is the WBS. all right, for a bicycle. All right, no, but you see as they arrange it: 1.1 project management, 1.2 frame, 1.3 saddle area, 1.4 front seat. So all these are the different work that needs to be done. But you now see that they decided to break it down. Saddle area, we will do saddle and seat. You see, they did all the breakdown. So all these other level, all these ones that they cannot further break down, is what we refers to as work package. All this other level under this 1.1 front seat that they can no longer break down, it becomes what? Work package. So that is the part of a project that becomes easy to assign to any team member to carry out. And what do we want to achieve when we are carrying out WBS? We want to have the scope baseline. What is the scope baseline? The scope baseline automatically becomes that official document that becomes an approved scope for the project, which means we cannot minus the scope, we cannot reduce. And if there is any need to make change to that document, we must follow through the approved change process. So what are the components of the scope baseline? You can see the project scope statement, the WBS and WBS dictionary. Excuse me, sir, what do you mean by WBS dictionary? Remember that the WBS is just an hierarchical structure. It doesn't have explanations. It just showed us the structures, the hierarchical structure. So you can see in this case of barbecue, you see the WBS strictly based on the hierarchical structure. It just shows us this is what needs to be done. It did not show us an explanation. Now, WBS dictionary is now that detailed explanation that support the WBS. So WBS dictionary is the explanation you have in support to buttress or to describe what you have in your WBS. Example, you may have bought a new product before, maybe a TV set or a remote or anything. You now see that the case they gave you, they now give you a small write-up. They now give you a small write-up. The write-up is now to just explain that product you bought. That becomes what? You now see that, for instance, if it is a gadget, you see that they will draw the gadget and label it. Then after that label, you now see a small brief description of what they have drawn in that gadget. That explanation is what will look like a WBS. So WBS dictionary is the explanation of these hierarchical structures to buttress the point you have in your what? Hierarchical structure. That becomes your what? WBS dictionary. Please, do we get that? All right. Okay, so let's move on. Now, you have successfully created all your documents, which is your WBS, the hierarchical structure. I don't know, Joseph, have you worked with a WBS before? From experience, I just want to ask. Mm, okay. All right. So the project work was in what area? Okay. All right. So you can see that that buttress the point that it is not just the project manager that creates WBS. Okay. Take note of that. Okay. Then another thing I also quickly need to say is that that WBS that is created it also enable, there's what we call slipping through crack. So it creates that pictorial view where you can actually view every work that needs to be done. So if any work is missing, you can easily identify it. That no, we did not talk about tiling. Maybe in the building, you cannot say there's no aspect of this project that talk about tiling. So which means if it is not captured in the WBS, it can bring about error in the project. Shall you understand? That is how important this WBS is. So WBS is now a ground for you to be able to estimate your cost. It now gives you the ability to estimate for your resources. It gives you the ability to even know which area of the project will bring more risk. It gives you the ability to even know which aspect of your project you should have more quality assurance. That is how important the WBS is. And that is why it is not just the project manager that does that. Everybody involved in the team. Okay, please take note of that statement. All right, WBS is very important. It is the secret of any project. All right, so what does it does is that it ensures it makes no work to slip through the crack. Just discover that you can't just suddenly discover that what happened to electrification? How come we are no, you can't miss it. So WBS will show the pictorial view or the hierarchical structure of all the work that needs to be done. Now let's now look at validate scope. Validating scope is the interim formal acceptance of your project deliverables. Now, what I need you to know here, who validates the scope? Please note it. It is not the project manager that validates scope. Who validates scope? It is the customer. So validating of scope, it can be done at the end of the project and it can also be done at each phase of a project. So it depends on the kind of project you are working on. It can be done at the total end of the project, but it can also be done at the end of each phase of the project. So validate scope is more like that frequent planned meeting with the customer or sponsor to gain formal acceptance of the deliverable during monitoring and controlling your project. So validate scope automatically is that process in your project where you invite the sponsor or the customer. After you have done due diligence, so you now say, okay, let the customer come and check the tiling work we have done if it's okay. Did you check the bedroom tiling? Check all the tiling. So the customer come and check only tiling and tell you, oh, I like this tile, everything is fine. It validates. What have you done? You have done what refers to as what? Validate scope. Okay, so who validates the scope? The customer. It is not the project manager that validates scope. So it is the customer that validates scope. So what is validate scope? Like I said, validate scope is that formal acceptance which can be interim in nature. All right. So the process or the benefit of validate scope is to ensure that the project is on track from the customer perspective. That is why some organizations prefer that validate scope should be done at the end of each phase. All right. Why some will say, oh, well, let's wait until the end of the project. It depends on the kind of project you are working on. All right. So if it depends on that, there are some projects that all you just need to do is to do it. It should validate at the end of each phase. So as at each phase of the project, you keep validating until you get to the end of the project. Okay. So validate scope is that formal final acceptance of the interim deliverable by the project. Okay, who does that validate scope? I've told you it is either the customer, as you can see on the screen, it is either the customer or the sponsor. So it is either the customer comes to validate scope or the sponsor comes to validate scope. Okay, so it is when that customer give you a go ahead, you can say, oh, he accept what we have done, let's go ahead to the next phase, or let's move on to another project. That becomes what? Validate scope. Okay, so what do we want to achieve when we are validating scope? Is either we have accepted deliverables, the customer is pleased with what he has seen, he say, oh yes, I accept, it's very good. Or the customer say, no, I don't like what I have seen, change it. There becomes a change request. Okay, now what method or what tools and technique often used to validate scope? The customer comes to do inspection. So the major tools for validating scope is what? Inspection. So if a customer comes to check what you have done in the project, is coming to inspect. Is that not so, sir? So that becomes what? Validate scope. Okay, so the technique used is what? Inspection. Then control scope. Remember, validate scope is done by the customer. Control scope is now done by who? The project manager. What is now control scope? Control scope is now the process of monitoring. Who is monitoring the project? The project manager is monitoring the status of the project and the product itself, and managing all possible changes that may occur from different customers. So it is possible that some customers or stakeholders will come and say, no, we don't want this again, change this, add this to it. He manages those changes. So control scope is when the project manager ensure that what was planned to be done, and he compares it with what was actually done to see if they are in alignment or not. So controlling scope is ensuring that the project manager is monitoring the project and ensuring that only what we plan to do is what we are doing. And if it happened that we are doing outside what we plan to do, it can easily carry out changes. That is what control scope. So you can see the key benefit is that this process allowed the scope baseline to be maintained throughout the project. But there are instances where you see a team member, maybe because of ambiguity, he didn't understand, the statement wasn't clearly stated to him, or maybe the language used was very difficult to understand, or he did not understand some things. He now decided to carry out a task outside that scope. What happened? Change will be made. So control scope is when the project manager is focusing on all the scoping activities, ensuring that only those activities is actually done. So right, you can see that is the statement here stated. Ensuring that all requested changes, either he recommend corrective or preventive actions, and all those actions must pass through the perform integrated change control. Then what is scope creeping? Now, the project manager is to ensure that there is no scope creeping. So that is also part of the reason of control scope. It will ensure that only those work that we said we want to do, and that is the work we are actually doing, preventing every form of scope creeping. What is scope creeping? Yes, let me ask you, Joseph, what is scope creeping from experience? Exactly, exactly. That becomes what? Scope creeping. Now, the point there is that it was not initially planned for. It wasn't even part of the discussion. But suddenly you now discover that additional work, uncontrolled additional work started coming in. There's no explanation for it. That becomes what? Scope creeping. And note, just as you have also said, uncontrolled or additional work coming in. When we say uncontrolled, now it actually becomes scope creeping when those work are now performed without your permission or you being aware as a project manager. So you now see that a team member is carrying out an additional work that was not planned for, and you are not aware. It becomes what refers to what? Scope creeping. But you can see that if a team member is carrying out an additional work and you are aware, which means automatically it has passed through the necessary approval process. But if a team member now decides to go and be carrying out additional work and you, the project manager, you are not aware, and it goes on to execute it, which can eventually bring more risk to the project or delay the project, it becomes what? Scope creeping. All right? I'm so glad you understand that. So what do we want to achieve when we are controlling scope? Work performance information. So from that information, we can make change requests and update whatever we need to update. So control scope, the tools used is variance analysis. Variance analysis in this case is saying that we need to be checking. We'll check what our plan is and what we actually did to see if they are in alignment. If it is the scope of work that we plan to do, we actually did. And that is the variance analysis. So the process of checking or measuring or comparing the plan is what refers to as the variance analysis, to know if actually that there is what? A variance. Now, let me quickly ask you this question. Between validate scope and control scope, technically, which one do you think comes first? Technically, please. Okay. All right. Please take note of that. All right. So, any question for me? So that is all we need to discuss about scope of scoping. Why did you say so? Okay, okay. All right. No problem. So which means we just stick to weekend then when we will not be too busy. At least you would have rested and just take your time, take your class, and that's all. Okay. So thank you for your time. You too. Take care. Best regard.